Under the glittering lights of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, the atmosphere of the gala was poised and elegant until the blow landed. Evelyn Ashford's hand cracked across Naomi Carter Pierce's face, the sound sharp enough to cut through the hum of conversation. Gasps rippled across the marble hall as three members of the Ashford family closed in. Richard Ashford Jr. seized Naomi's silk scarf, jerking her backward into the dessert table. A cascade of chocolate mousse spilled across her dress and caviar scattered like dark jewels onto the floor. Sloane Ashford Hastings kicked Naomi's purse, sending its contents spilling in all directions. "Look at that cheap knockoff bag," she sneered. From behind them, Senator Victor Ashford leveled his silver cane at Naomi's chest. "Security, remove this creature immediately." The Ashfords formed a predatory circle around her as more than 200 wealthy guests raised their phones. Flashes erupted across the room. Naomi stood motionless, chocolate dripping from her fingers, caught in the glare of Washington's most powerful family. The circle tightened as the Ashfords pressed their advantage. Evelyn's expression hardened into cold disdain. "This woman clearly snuck in through the service entrance," she declared, her Cartier bracelet catching the light as she waved Naomi off like refuse. Richard Jr. held his phone high, snapping pictures as if documenting a crime scene. "Look at that discount store dress," he scoffed. "It probably cost less than the wine we're serving tonight." Beside him, Sloane lifted her own phone, angling it carefully for the perfect shot. "Going live from the Smithsonian Gala," she announced, her voice dripping with mockery. "Catching a party crasher red-handed." Her words were punctuated by a theatrical sniff. "I can literally smell the desperation." Senator Victor Ashford leaned on his cane, studying Naomi with a practiced eye, the air of a man who had seen it all before. "In 30 years of politics," he said gravely, "I've watched people like this read about events in the gossip pages and then show up believing they belong here." Each remark landed like a blow, their rhythm synchronized, the family moving with the predatory confidence of those certain no one would dare challenge them. Naomi remained silent at the center, her dignity clashing with the coordinated cruelty closing in around her. Sloane angled her phone higher, her manicured smile fixed in place as the viewer count climbed rapidly. "My followers are dying right now," she whispered into the stream, her voice low but gleeful. Comments poured across her screen in a frenzy. "OMG, call the police. Hard emoji. Fire emoji." Richard smirked, stepping closer to Naomi. "Ma'am, I run the largest defense contractor in the Mid-Atlantic. I know the value of everything in this room. Your entire outfit wouldn't even cover the tax on my watch." His words drew approving chuckles from a few nearby onlookers. Victor tapped his cane sharply against the marble floor, commanding attention. "This is what I've seen all my life in Washington," he proclaimed, raising his voice so others could hear. "They read about events in glossy magazines, then slip in thinking they can blend among us. Likely has outstanding warrants too." The rhythm of the assault was unmistakable now. An orchestrated performance delivered to the cameras, crafted for maximum humiliation. Guests whispered and filmed, the glow of phone screens reflecting in the polished stone. Naomi stood still, her silence magnified by the jeers, her calm a stark contrast to the family's coordinated cruelty. The museum's head of security, a retired MPD captain, approached with measured steps. He had managed art thefts and celebrity scandals before, but something about this scene unsettled him. The Ashfords' confidence radiated like they owned the marble beneath their feet. From overhead, the gala host's voice rang out over the loudspeakers. 10 minutes remain until the auction closes. Final bids are being accepted." The announcement seemed to sharpen Evelyn Ashford's focus. She turned to the security chief with imperious authority. "I've served on this museum's board for 30 years. Remove her immediately." Sloane's live stream spiked past 25,000 viewers, the comments morphing into a feeding frenzy. "OMG, she looks guilty. Throw her out. Check her pockets." Racial slurs began to appear in the torrent of text, and Sloane did nothing to stop them. Victor raised his cane slightly, his voice booming with political weight. "I have the police chief on speed dial. One call, and this becomes a federal trespassing case." The words carried like a verdict, the kind of threat meant to silence opposition. Naomi stood at the center, chocolate still staining her dress. With calm precision, she reached into her simple clutch for tissues, dabbing at her face. As she opened the purse, several items flashed into view. A first-class boarding pass from Reagan National to Dubai, the glinting edge of a titanium credit card, and the buzzing screen of a phone with dozens of missed calls. The security chief caught sight of the boarding pass but couldn't read the name. Richard leaned in, his smirk unwavering. I employ half the private security firms in Washington. Once word spreads about tonight, you'll never work in this city again. Evelyn added, her tone dripping with scorn, assuming she even has a job. The crowd murmured, the cruelty tightening like a vice as the Ashfords prepared to finish what they had begun. The murmurs in the hall swelled as more guests pressed forward, eager to watch the spectacle unfold. The glow of dozens of phone cameras bathed Naomi in a harsh, unrelenting light. Her phone buzzed constantly, notifications flashing across the screen, Bloomberg alerts, Reuters headlines, missed calls piling higher by the second. Yet she made no move to answer. The museum director arrived, face flushed from his hurried approach. His eyes darted between the Ashfords and the growing crowd. What seems to be the problem here? He asked, his voice carrying the nervous weight of someone trying to protect powerful donors. She crashed our gala, Evelyn answered smoothly, every syllable rehearsed. Probably hoping to mingle with people far above her station or steal jewelry during cocktail hour. Richard piled on without hesitation. She's already making a scene. Arrest her and be done with it. The director turned to Naomi, his expression uneasy. Ma'am, I'm afraid you'll need to show me your invitation and identification. Naomi paused in her slow attempt to blot chocolate from her dress. For the first time since Evelyn's slap, she spoke. Her voice was calm, even, deliberate. I'd like to make a phone call first. Denied, the head of security said sharply, as if swatting down a trivial request. You can call a lawyer from the station. Evelyn's smile curved with triumph. See how they always want to make a call once they're caught? The crowd leaned closer, their phones raised higher. The circle of wealthy guests now formed a glowing wall of lenses around Naomi. Some streamed live to their own platforms, eager to feed the viral frenzy. On Sloane's feed, the viewer count leapt past 60,000. The comments were growing more hostile, demanding action. Naomi glanced briefly at her watch, the first hint of concern crossing her otherwise steady face. The auction's closing ticked ever closer and time was running out. The Ashford family sensed blood in the water. Their confidence grew with each passing second as they commanded the room like generals on a battlefield. Last chance, Senator Victor declared, pointing his silver cane at Naomi's chest. Leave voluntarily or you'll be arrested for trespassing. His voice carried the weight of decades in politics, designed to make threats stick. Evelyn assumed command, her tone sharp and decisive. Richard, get your corporate security here immediately. Sloane, make sure this goes viral. Victor, you know who to call. Each instruction snapped like an order drilled into soldiers. Richard stepped away, phone pressed to his ear. It's Ashford. I need a full team at the Smithsonian now. Trespassing situation that requires immediate resolution. His words carried the unshakable assurance of a man who'd never been told no. Sloane, camera perfectly positioned, whispered breathlessly to her audience. Okay, beautiful people, we're at 75,000 viewers and climbing. This is insane. Security is about to drag her out. Should I follow them to catch the arrest footage? The comments section erupted, toxic and eager. Make her famous for the wrong reasons. Check her bag. Why is she just standing there? Victor lifted his phone, speaking with the calm confidence of influence. Commissioner Martinez? Yes, it's Victor Ashford. I need a favor at the Smithsonian. Priority response. He paused, then added with chilling familiarity. Yes, the same Victor who secured your budget last year. Naomi stood perfectly still in the center of the chaos, methodically blotting the stains from her dress. Around her, the air tightened with anticipation. The museum director twisted his hands, glancing at his watch, his anxiety multiplying as more board members arrived. Their whispered conversations carried a single question: should they risk alienating the Ashfords? Naomi checked her own watch again. 5 minutes until the auction closed. The circle was tightening, the clock was ticking, and every exit had been sealed. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for the breaking point. Conversations hushed, phones angled high, capturing every second. The spectacle had become more entertaining than the auction itself. Sloane leaned toward her camera, her voice bubbling with glee. We've just crossed 100,000 viewers, beautiful people. This is literally the biggest stream I've ever done. Can you believe it? She's just standing there like she doesn't realize she's been caught. Her manicured finger scrolled through the flood of comments. She looks guilty. Why hasn't security cuffed her yet? Check her pockets. The words blurred together into a mob chant. Richard returned to the circle, his voice sharp with corporate authority. My security team is 3 minutes out. Full background check, criminal history, warrants. Within the hour, we'll know everything about you. He studied Naomi as if she were a problem to be solved, not a person. The head of security received radio confirmation. Multiple MPD units were already en route, ETA 4 minutes. He adjusted his stance, waiting for the moment to act. Evelyn's triumphant smile widened. Perfect timing. This will be documented for legal proceedings, trespassing, disturbing the peace, maybe even attempted theft. She glanced at the cameras around them, relishing the optics. Naomi's phone buzzed again, this time flashing with what looked like a video call. She glanced down, and for the first time all evening, her eyes flickered with something new, an acknowledgement of the clock running out. Senator Victor struck the marble floor with his cane. Time's up. No more delays, no more excuses. The security perimeter tightened, 8 guards and 4 Ashfords closing in. 200 phone cameras followed, ready to record her final humiliation. Sloane whispered into her stream, her voice trembling with anticipation. I think she's about to completely break down. Stay tuned, people. This is about to get insane. The viewer count surged past 120,000 as the air thickened with expectation. The hall had become a theater, and Naomi its unwilling centerpiece. Every exit was sealed by guards in dark suits. Richard's corporate team swept in with military precision, their zip ties dangling like shackles, waiting to be used. The Ashfords stood tall, savoring their dominance. Evelyn raised her voice for the crowd, each syllable honed like a blade. Let this be a lesson, she declared. There are consequences when people forget their place in society. A murmur of approval rippled through the guests, some nodding as if justice were being restored. Naomi's phone buzzed again. She lifted it slightly, the glow reflecting in her calm eyes. The caller ID pulsed insistently. She inhaled deeply, her movements unhurried, as though immune to the storm closing around her. Instead of answering, she held the phone steady, tilting the screen toward the head of security. For an instant, the man's hardened composure cracked. His brow furrowed, his lips parted, and then his face drained of color as he read what was displayed. He stumbled back, almost tripping over his own feet. His radio slipped from his hand and clattered against the marble floor, the sound echoing through the hushed hall. Stand down, he whispered hoarsely into the tense silence. All units, stand down immediately. The museum director rushed closer, peering at the phone. His knees buckled slightly, one hand bracing against the wall as his eyes widened in disbelief. Oh my God, he breathed, trembling. Evelyn's confidence faltered for the first time all evening. What's wrong? Just arrest her, she snapped, her voice edged with panic. But the shift was undeniable. The air had changed. The circle that had pressed so tightly around Naomi began to unravel as fear replaced arrogance. Something on that glowing screen had just rewritten the entire story. Naomi did not speak. She simply stood in the center of the marble hall, chocolate still staining her gown, phone held steady in her hand. The glow of the screen was the only light that seemed to matter now. The head of security backed away further, raising both hands in a gesture of surrender. His voice, once clipped and commanding, shook as he repeated himself. Stand down, all of you, immediately. The museum director leaned forward, eyes locked on the phone. He swayed slightly, as though the weight of what he saw might crush him. Miss Pierce, we had no idea. Please accept our sincerest apologies. His words trailed off into a hush that rippled through the crowd. The Ashfords froze, their triumphant choreography collapsing. Richard's phone slipped from his nerveless fingers and shattered on the marble. Sloane's livestream, still running, captured every detail in high definition as her manicured hand trembled. Her voice cracked on the stream. What is that? Why is he apologizing? The comment section erupted with confusion. Wait, what's happening? Why is security backing off? Show us the phone. Evelyn's carefully built facade broke. She clutched Richard's arm, her diamond bracelets clinking against his sleeve. What is it? She demanded. What are they seeing? Naomi finally moved. With the same calm precision that had carried her through every insult, she rotated the screen toward the crowd. The image came into focus. Her Forbes profile displayed in crystal clarity. Naomi Carter Pierce. Net worth, $3.2 billion. Ranked number 47. Chief Executive Officer, Helios Aerospace Defense, the largest private defense contractor in North America. Beneath it, a message thread glowed with urgency. Naomi, Pentagon needs your decision on the 1.8B contract by midnight EST. Joint Chiefs rescheduled for 0800. Can you attend virtually? Taiwan defense package requires immediate approval. The silence in the hall shattered under the weight of revelation. Gasps cut through the air, and phones that had moments ago filmed her humiliation now shook in hands desperate to capture the plot twist of a lifetime. The shock rippled through the hall like a sudden earthquake. Guests who only moments earlier had been laughing or filming stood frozen, their faces pale under the chandelier light. The information on Naomi's phone glowed like a beacon of truth, undeniable and devastating. Sloane's livestream captured every reaction in real time. Viewers flooded the comments. "She's literally a billionaire. Wait, that's Helios Aerospace Defense. The Ashfords are finished." The viewer count surged past 150,000, the stream going viral across platforms faster than Sloane could comprehend. Richard Ashford Jr. stared at the screen as though it were a weapon pointed directly at him. That can't be possible," he stammered, his corporate confidence melting away. His phone slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble with a sound that echoed like a death knell. "You look so normal," he whispered, almost to himself. Naomi's voice cut through the stunned silence, steady and sharp. "I don't need diamonds to prove my worth. Apparently, you do." The words landed harder than any slap, reverberating across the room. Guests who had eagerly recorded her humiliation now frantically deleted their footage, horrified at the idea of being caught complicit in attacking one of the most powerful women in America. Board members who had remained silent pushed forward, desperate to separate themselves from the Ashfords. The museum director bent low, nearly bowing. "Miss Pierce, I had no idea you were attending tonight. Please forgive this appalling treatment. We will rectify..." His voice broke, trembling with panic. Senator Victor Ashford gripped his cane until his knuckles turned white. The political calculus ran wild in his mind. Defense budgets, campaign contributions, military contracts, all suddenly hanging by a single thread. The woman they had just called a creature. Evelyn swayed unsteadily, her world tilting on its axis. "But you're dressed so simply," she whispered, as though her mind could not process the collision of wealth, power, and understatement before her. Naomi's calm gaze never wavered. "I prefer substance over flash. A foreign concept to your family, it seems." Naomi's second phone lit up, its vibration loud in the sudden hush. The caller ID flashed across the screen. Ashford Industries. Board emergency session. Live. Below it, a cascade of missed calls scrolled. Richard Jr. 23, Goldman Sachs 15, Pentagon Liaison 31, Bloomberg 8, White House Situation Room 4, NATO Defense Council 2. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the glowing list reflected in dozens of raised phones. Sloane's livestream zoomed in shakily, her audience exploding in disbelief. "Is that the Pentagon? She's literally on speed dial with NATO. This is bigger than Netflix." Naomi studied the screen for a moment, then, with deliberate slowness, pressed decline. The gesture was surgical, proof of control, proof that their desperation no longer dictated her time. Her eyes lifted, steady and unhurried. "Your board has been trying to reach me for the past hour," she said, her voice calm but razor-edged. "Something about contract renewals worth $847 million. The words hit harder than any gavel. Richard Jr.'s face drained of color. The security team that had surrounded Naomi moments before stepped back instinctively, their formation unraveling. They now realized they had been seconds away from shackling the very woman who held their company's future in her hands. The museum director swayed again, his face ashen. "Miss Pierce, please, you must understand. We never..." He stopped himself, unable to finish, knowing that excuses were meaningless. Phones buzzed throughout the hall as news alerts began to spread. Screens lit up with headlines. Defense CEO humiliated at Gala. Smithsonian incident goes viral. Reporters in the crowd were already typing furiously, their tweets seeding a storm that would be impossible to contain. Victor Ashford's grip tightened on his cane. He had threatened her with arrest. Now he understood he had endangered his entire political career. Evelyn clutched Richard's arm as though his strength could shield her from the truth unraveling around them. Naomi checked her watch again. 3 minutes until the auction closed. The timing no longer mattered. The Ashford's empire was already collapsing. Naomi's calm presence now commanded the entire hall. She reached once more into her simple black clutch, withdrawing a folded document with the ease of someone who knew the weight it carried. The paper bore the unmistakable letterhead of the Smithsonian's major gifts department. "I tried to tell you I belonged here," she said softly, her voice carrying effortlessly through the silence. "Tonight, I am this institution's largest individual donor." She unfolded the confirmation and held it up for all to see. Pierce Foundation, pledge confirmation. Amount, $50,000. Purpose, contemporary artists of Color Wing. Processing status completed. Date, today. The number seemed to shimmer under the chandeliers. The crowd gasped again, their disbelief compounding with every revelation. Evelyn staggered, her hand clutching Richard's sleeve as if it could anchor her in reality. Richard's corporate mind finally grasped the implications. His company's largest military contracts, the quarterly earnings, 15,000 jobs spread across 12 states. Everything hinged on the woman they had just humiliated in front of 200 witnesses and more than 200,000 live stream viewers. Senator Victor swayed where he stood, the polished silver cane trembling in his grip. Campaign contributions, defense appropriations, committee appointments, all of it could be stripped away by the single figure standing calmly before him. His political survival now depended on her mercy. Sloane's live stream hit 150,000 live viewers. The comments section turned into chaos. She donated $50 million? The Ashfords are finished. This is the plot twist of the decade. Board members who had hung back earlier now surged forward, tripping over their apologies. The museum director bowed his head, voice unsteady. Miss Pierce, on behalf of the Smithsonian, we are honored, beyond honored, by your generosity. Please forgive this dreadful mistake. Naomi's expression never changed. She folded the document carefully and slipped it back into her clutch. The hush in the room was absolute. For the first time that night, the Ashfords had nothing left to say. Naomi let the silence stretch, then reached again into her clutch. This time she drew out a thick leather portfolio bound with colored tabs and neat dividers. She laid it across the table with deliberate precision, as though opening a case in a courtroom. Her gaze settled first on Evelyn. Your late husband's foundation, the very cornerstone of your social legacy, would collapse without me. She flipped a tabbed page. $200 million over 5 years. All anonymous donations, routed through donor ID 0001. That was me. Your children's hospital wing, your scholarships, your art acquisitions, all of them tethered to my support. I withdraw it, and within 24 hours, the Hamilton Ashford Foundation ceases to exist. Evelyn's face drained of color. Her body sagged against the nearest chair, the Cartier on her wrist trembling against the fabric as reality closed in. Naomi turned to Richard Jr., her movements crisp, her tone surgical. Ashford Industries reported revenue of $2.1 billion last fiscal year. My contracts account for $847 million of that, nearly 40%. Defense contract 47 Alpha, renewable annually, at my sole discretion. She slid another document across the table, stamped with a government seal. Page 47, subsection 12, morality clause. Quote, contractor reserves the right to terminate immediately for conduct detrimental to public reputation. She let the words hang in the air before continuing. Page 63, cancellation penalties, liquidated damages, $340 million. Richard's knees buckled. The confidence of a corporate titan melted into the panic of a man watching his empire bleed out on paper. Naomi shifted her focus to Sloane, whose phone was still recording but shaking in her hands. Your lifestyle brand partnerships generate roughly $4.2 million annually. My investment firm, Helios Capital, owns 63% equity in the collective that funds them. Hermes, Tiffany, Bergdorf Goodman, contracts all subject to immediate termination for reputational damage. Your penthouse mortgage, held by my real estate trust. Your Range Rover lease, my lending division. Even your daughter's tuition, covered by a scholarship from my education foundation. One call, Naomi said evenly, and all of it evaporates before sunrise. Sloane whimpered, lowering her phone as though it burned her. The live stream, still climbing in viewership, caught her complete unraveling. Finally, Naomi turned to Victor. Your career, Senator, rests on $12 million in contributions funneled through my political action committees. Your appointment to armed services was secured with my written endorsement. And that military base in your district? 15,000 civilian jobs. My company operates it exclusively. I file one ethics complaint, and every clearance you hold is suspended. The base shuts down, your state's economy implodes, and your career, she closed the portfolio with a soft snap, ends overnight. The family stood paralyzed, the floor beneath their feet no longer marble, but quicksand. Naomi had transformed the hall from a social stage into a tribunal, and the verdict was already written. Naomi let the weight of her words linger before she set the portfolio down with quiet finality. Then she lifted her eyes, her voice steady and calm, yet carrying the gravity of judgment. "Here is what happens next," she said. "Each of you has exactly one choice: compliance or complete destruction." Her gaze fixed first on Evelyn. "You will record a public apology within 24 hours. It will be broadcast live across every major platform. You will resign from 3 charitable boards immediately and submit written statements admitting your discriminatory conduct. And you will transfer $10 million to the NAACP within 48 hours. Naomi's tone did not waver. "If you refuse, I withdraw all anonymous funding. $200 million vanishes overnight. Your foundation collapses, your legacy crumbles, and your husband's name becomes synonymous with fraud." Evelyn's lips moved soundlessly, her supremacy dissolving before the entire room. Naomi turned to Richard Jr. "You will issue a formal apology to all employees and shareholders within 12 hours. Every executive will complete 40 hours of unconscious bias training within 30 days. You will promote 3 qualified black executives to the C-suite by the end of the quarter, and you will publish diversity reports every quarter going forward." She tapped the portfolio gently. "If you refuse, I terminate $847 million in contracts within 72 hours. Your stock price plummets. 15,000 jobs disappear. Your board votes you out. Bankruptcy by February." Richard swallowed hard. The blood drained from his face. Naomi's eyes shifted to Sloane, who stood trembling, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "You will delete every original live stream immediately. Within 6 hours, you will record and post a sincere public apology. For 1 year, you will exclusively promote black-owned businesses on your platform. And you will donate 100% of your influencer earnings to minority entrepreneur funds with public accounting." Her voice sharpened just slightly. "If you refuse, I end every sponsorship contract and initiate legal action for defamation and harassment. Your career is finished before the week is out." Sloane let out a broken sob, her hand gripping her lifeless phone. Finally, Naomi faced Senator Victor. "You will testify publicly in support of anti-discrimination legislation within 30 days. You will return the $12 million in contributions my firms provided, transferring them to established civil rights organizations. And you will co-sponsor 3 major equality bills in the next congressional session." Her eyes narrowed. "If you refuse, I testify before the Senate Ethics Committee with full documentation. Your security clearances are suspended. The base in your district closes. Your state's economy collapses, and your career ends in scandal." The air in the grand hall turned heavy, almost suffocating. Naomi glanced at her watch with casual precision. "You have exactly 60 seconds to decide." The Ashfords stared back, their power stripped away, their empire hanging by a thread. The marble floor of the Smithsonian no longer felt like a ballroom, it had become a courtroom. And Naomi Carter Pierce, once their victim, was now the judge, jury, and executioner. Evelyn broke first. Her voice cracked like porcelain dropped on stone. I accept," she whispered, clutching the arm of her son as though it could steady her. The woman who had once ruled Washington society with a lifted eyebrow now sounded like a frightened child. Richard Jr. followed seconds later, his pride collapsing under the sheer force of survival. "Helios Aerospace will have Ashford Industries' full compliance. All requirements will be met ahead of schedule," he said, hollowly, the words drained of his usual corporate confidence. He sounded less like a titan of industry and more like a man who had just watched his kingdom reduced to rubble. Sloane nodded frantically, her tears streaking through the last of her perfect makeup. She couldn't even find the breath to speak. Her influencer empire had collapsed live in front of hundreds of thousands of viewers. Senator Victor straightened his back with what dignity he could muster, gripping his cane as if it might hold together the fragments of his career. "I accept full responsibility for my actions," he said, his tone measured but unsteady. "I commit to your proposed legislative agenda." The words tasted like ash, but he forced them out, knowing refusal would destroy not just him but everyone tied to his name. Naomi closed her portfolio with a soft thud that sounded like a gavel striking wood. The sound resonated through the hall, final and absolute. "Excellent," she said. "My legal team will deliver detailed compliance documents within 48 hours. Failure to meet any deadline results in immediate implementation of all consequences." She gathered her documents with meticulous care, each movement echoing the precision of someone who had dismantled empires before. Around her, the silence was total. The audience, who had once cheered for her humiliation, now watched in awe as one black woman redefined the balance of power. The marble floor of the Smithsonian no longer belonged to the Ashfords. It belonged to Naomi Carter Pierce. 6 months later, the transformation was undeniable. The fallout of that single night at the Smithsonian had reshaped not just the Ashfords, but the institutions they touched. Evelyn's apology video, filmed in her DuPont Circle penthouse, opened with trembling hands folded in her lap. Her voice shook as she spoke directly to the camera. I allowed privilege to blind me to basic human dignity. My behavior was inexcusable. The video drew 15 million views in its first day. On screen, receipts flashed, proof of a $10 million wire transfer to the NAACP, time-stamped and verified. Days later, Evelyn stepped down from 3 prestigious charitable boards, each resignation letter citing the need to confront unconscious bias and systemic discrimination. The Hamilton Ashford Foundation, saved only by an anonymous $50 million donation from Naomi herself, continued its programs. But Evelyn no longer led from supremacy, only from humility. Richard Jr. faced his employees in an emergency company-wide meeting. Broadcast to 15,000 workers across 12 states, he admitted the truth. We publicly humiliated our most valued partner. That is unacceptable, and I take responsibility. Within weeks, Helios Consultants rolled out a 40-hour unconscious bias program for every executive and manager. By the end of the quarter, 3 highly qualified black leaders had been promoted into the C-suite. Dr. Patrice Williams as Chief Innovation Officer, Marcus Johnson as Chief Financial Officer, and Angela Thompson as Chief Operating Officer. Quarterly diversity reports followed, laying bare demographic breakdowns, pay equity, and promotion data. Other defense contractors began to adopt the same model, unwilling to be seen lagging behind. Sloan's apology was raw, filmed without makeup under natural light. I weaponized my privilege, she confessed to the camera. I amplified discrimination to hundreds of thousands of people just for entertainment. The video garnered 23 million views. Over the next year, her platform featured only black-owned businesses, entrepreneurs, and creators. Every dollar of her influencer earnings, just over $4 million annually, was donated to minority entrepreneur funds, with monthly public accounting. Though her engagement initially dropped by 40%, her authenticity eventually won over millions, reshaping her following into a community with purpose. Senator Victor took the most painful steps. His testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee was broadcast nationwide on C-SPAN. My behavior demonstrated why stronger protections are necessary, he admitted. Power without accountability perpetuates inequality. Within the year, he co-sponsored 3 landmark bills, the Workplace Dignity Act, the Corporate Accountability and Defense Contracting Act, and the Social Media Platform Responsibility Act. Returning $12 million in campaign contributions required careful legal work, but the funds flowed instead into civil rights organizations, from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund to the National Urban League. The Ashfords had bent, they had yielded, and under Naomi Carter Pierce's unflinching conditions, they had begun to change. The ripple effects spread far beyond the Ashfords themselves. What began as a humiliation turned tribunal in the Smithsonian's Marble Hall had become a catalyst for systemic reform across industries. Within 6 months, 73 major defense contractors announced new family-inclusive morality clauses in their agreements. No longer would executive relatives be free to act with impunity. Their public behavior now carried contractual consequences. Corporate lawyers cited the Ashford precedent as the reason, quietly acknowledging Naomi's influence without daring to say her name aloud. Fortune 500 companies followed suit, unveiling dignity policies that extended beyond the workplace. Executives and their families were now bound to standards of respectful conduct at public events. Markets took notice. Financial analysts began flagging discrimination incidents as measurable risks, noting their potential to wipe billions from stock valuations overnight. Social media platforms, stung by the virality of Sloan's live stream, introduced new anti-harassment protocols. Algorithms were trained to detect and interrupt live-streamed discrimination before it could spiral into mob abuse. In training sessions for moderators, Sloan's original broadcast became a case study, a warning of what unchecked privilege and digital amplification could create. Even cultural institutions felt the impact. The Smithsonian itself implemented mandatory dignity training for its board members, staff, and major donors. Other museums across the United States soon adopted the same practice, determined never again to allow their marble halls to become arenas of public cruelty. The reforms were formalized into a package the press quickly named the Ashford Protocols. What began as a family's attempt to humiliate one black woman had rewritten the standards of corporate, cultural, and political accountability. And at the center of it all, Naomi Carter Pierce said nothing publicly. She did not grant interviews, did not issue statements, did not seek credit. Quiet power had no need to shout. The world had already heard. 2 years later, the legend of that night at the Smithsonian had become part of American history. Business schools dissected it, political science courses analyzed it, and leadership seminars used it as a case study in quiet power reshaping public systems. Naomi Carter Pierce stood at the podium of the World Economic Forum's special session in New York City, her simple black dress recalling the gown once stained with chocolate mousse. She needed no jewels, no flash. The room, 2,000 global leaders, CEOs, heads of state, fell silent at the sight of her calm composure. "True power doesn't announce itself," she said, her voice carrying easily across the chamber. "It builds systems that outlast the moment." Behind her, a massive screen displayed the words, "The Naomi Protocol, Harvard Business School's required case study on economic leverage as a tool for social justice." Her method had already been replicated by marginalized leaders in industries from tech to finance. Instead of demanding revenge, they used contracts, capital, and policy to enforce dignity. Naomi's influence had grown. Her foundation had awarded $500 million in grants to minority-owned businesses. Helios Capital directed $2.3 billion toward companies with diverse leadership. Federal legislation, backed by her advocacy, now required public companies to report diversity metrics in all government contracts. Her personal life carried the same understated gravity. She had married Deputy Secretary Michael Harrison in a ceremony praised for its elegance and simplicity. Guests included defense officials, civil rights leaders, and heads of Fortune 100 companies. Their partnership symbolized the fusion of defense innovation and social equity. And the Ashfords? Their transformation was no longer questioned. Evelyn toured the country with her memoir Unlearning Supremacy, donating all proceeds to civil rights groups. Richard stepped down as CEO and became a coach on inclusive leadership, while his company's stock had climbed 47% under new diverse management. Sloan reinvented herself as social media's most effective advocate for minority entrepreneurs, her platform generating more than $200 million in revenue for black-owned businesses. Senator Victor, once nearly destroyed, had become a bipartisan voice for equality, re-elected with his widest margin ever. The Marble Hall humiliation had not destroyed them, it had remade them, and at its heart was one black woman who had proven that dignity, when paired with strategy, could move the world. The legacy of that night continued to ripple outward, reshaping not only the Ashfords but entire systems of power. The Ashford Protocols had become a global benchmark. Within 2 years, 847 corporations worldwide had adopted policies requiring executives and their families to maintain public standards of dignity. What began in a Washington museum had crossed oceans and industries. Discrimination incidents at public events in major U.S. cities fell by 73%, as security staff and corporate boards enforced the new clauses with unprecedented seriousness. Social media platforms, pressured by lawmakers and advertisers alike, reported a 60% reduction in harassment live streams after deploying the very detection tools inspired by Sloan's broadcast. The impact reached Wall Street. Analysts now factored reputation volatility into market risk assessments. A single act of public bias could send a company's valuation plunging, investors citing the Smithsonian incident as their reference point. Naomi's quiet precedent had woven accountability into the language of capital itself. Cultural institutions redefined their own responsibilities. The Smithsonian's Contemporary Artists of Color Wing, funded by Naomi's $50 million pledge, opened to international acclaim. Other museums across America followed, dedicating entire galleries to underrepresented voices while pairing exhibitions with mandatory training for donors and trustees. The message was clear: money alone could no longer buy immunity from consequence. Meanwhile, Naomi's foundation expanded its reach, awarding $500 million in grants to minority-owned businesses and entrepreneurs. Her investment firm, Helios Capital, directed $2.3 billion toward companies led by women and people of color, proving that diversity was not just ethical but profitable. The press called it the Maya method at first, an echo of another story of quiet power, but the name that stuck was her own, the Naomi Protocol. Business schools from Harvard to Stanford made it mandatory reading. Political leaders cited it in speeches. CEOs whispered about it in closed-door boardrooms. Through it all, Naomi Carter Pierce remained consistent. No grand interviews, no media blitz. Just contracts, clauses, and results. She had shown that a black woman, armed with strategy and dignity, could not only withstand humiliation, but transform it into lasting systemic change. Naomi's story became more than a cautionary tale for the powerful. It became a roadmap for the marginalized. At leadership conferences and graduate seminars, her name was invoked not as a symbol of scandal, but as proof that strategy could dismantle centuries-old systems of privilege. 2 years after the gala, she returned to the Smithsonian for the ribbon cutting of the Contemporary Artist of Color Wing. Reporters crowded the steps as Evelyn Ashford, once her tormentor, stood beside her. Evelyn's voice trembled with sincerity as she addressed the crowd. "I once believed the wealth entitled me to authority. I was wrong. Naomi Carter Pierce showed me that dignity is the highest currency." Their unlikely partnership, forged in humiliation and consequence, drew thunderous applause. Inside the gallery, bold works by Black, Latino, and Indigenous artists hung on the walls. For decades, their voices had been excluded from spaces like these. Now, their art filled a permanent wing, its creation traced directly to the night Naomi refused to bow to privilege. Visitors would forever link that collection to the moment a black woman turned abuse into legacy. Naomi herself avoided the spotlight, standing slightly apart in her simple black dress. Yet when she cut the ribbon, cameras flashed as though history itself were pausing to mark the occasion. Her face remained serene, her power undeniable. Meanwhile, Helios Aerospace Defense thrived under her leadership. Government contracts expanded, private investors flocked to align with her vision, and employees spoke of a workplace transformed by her insistence on equity. Shareholders marveled at the rising profits while quietly acknowledging that morality had become part of the bottom line. The Ashfords, too, had continued their redemption. Richard married Dr. Patrice Williams, the brilliant engineer Naomi had championed into the C-suite. Their partnership symbolized not just personal love, but the institutional shift Naomi had demanded. Sloan married Marcus Thompson, a civil rights attorney she met while volunteering at a legal aid clinic. Together, they built a platform that directed millions toward minority entrepreneurs. Senator Victor raised his adopted mixed-race granddaughter proudly, telling interviewers, "She saved me from myself." From boardrooms to Senate floors, from social feeds to museum wings, Naomi's quiet defiance echoed. She had proven that power need not be loud to endure, that when wielded with precision, it could turn humiliation into systemic justice. By the third year, Naomi Carter Pierce's influence was no longer confined to the United States. Her name had become shorthand for a new model of leadership, one that measured success not only in profit margins, but in the structures it reformed. At Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton, the Naomi Protocol was now mandatory coursework. Professors dissected every clause of her contracts, every calculated pause in the Smithsonian incident, teaching future executives how economic leverage could enforce accountability where laws fell short. Students debated not whether she was right, but how far her model could go in changing global business. In Geneva, at the United Nations, Naomi addressed the General Assembly. "Dignity," she said, "is not negotiable. If markets can punish companies for missed earnings, they can also punish them for moral failures. The two are not separate, they are the same." Her words were translated into 23 languages, broadcast worldwide. Delegates from countries as far as South Africa, Brazil, and South Korea cited her framework as a guide for anti-discrimination reforms in their own institutions. Back in Washington, Helios Aerospace Defense reported record growth, yet Naomi insisted on publishing full diversity metrics in every quarterly earnings report, setting a precedent no competitor could avoid. Investors grumbled at first, but the stock only climbed, silencing critics with proof that equity drove innovation. The Ashfords remained transformed. Evelyn traveled the country lecturing philanthropists on unlearning bias. Her book stayed on bestseller lists for months, translated into 6 languages. Richard, now remarried to Patrice Williams, became a celebrated coach for CEOs grappling with diversity reform. Under his successors, Ashford Industries became one of the most diverse employers in the defense sector, its performance soaring. Sloan, once known for luxury halls and sponsored posts, had rebranded entirely. With Marcus Thompson by her side, she directed her platform toward legal aid, minority startups, and social advocacy. Her audience grew past 4 million, drawn not to her handbags but to her authenticity. And Senator Victor, once a man who used his cane as a weapon of intimidation, was re-elected by the widest margin of his career. His bipartisan sponsorship of anti-discrimination bills earned him rare respect across party lines. At rallies, he often appeared with his young granddaughter perched on his arm, a living symbol of his redemption. The Smithsonian marble floor had become legend. Where once privilege circled like predators, now an entire generation of leaders studied the moment a black woman turned humiliation into a global system of accountability. Naomi Carter Pierce had not just survived that night, she had reshaped the world that made it possible. The story's ending did not feel like an ending at all, but a beginning. Naomi Carter Pierce had become a symbol far larger than one night at the Smithsonian. Her quiet defiance lived on as a blueprint for anyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or humiliated. Her foundation crossed the threshold of $500 million in grants awarded to minority-owned businesses. Helios Capital's $2.3 billion investment in diverse leadership reshaped industries from aerospace to finance. Federal agencies now required public companies to disclose diversity metrics in all contracts, a direct echo of Naomi's demands. But the deeper truth was more personal. At conferences and workshops, young entrepreneurs whispered her name as proof that resilience could become strategy. Community organizers cited her story as evidence that systemic change did not always come from protests in the street, but could also be forged in boardrooms, contracts, and carefully timed revelations. In her keynote at the World Economic Forum, Naomi reminded her audience of the lesson that began it all. Power, she said, does not have to be loud to change the world. It only has to be precise. The Ashfords themselves had become a living parable. Evelyn, Richard, Sloan, and Victor, once predators in a marble hall, were now advocates, their legacies forever tied to the transformation Naomi forced upon them. Their redemption was not instant, nor was it easy, but it proved possible. The Smithsonian wing Naomi had endowed stood as a physical reminder, art by underrepresented voices displayed where exclusion had once thrived. Visitors paused before the plaque that bore her foundation's name, often whispering the story to each other as though it were legend. And online, the question spread from classrooms to social feeds. A call to reflection. What's your Naomi moment? When were you underestimated? When did you turn humiliation into strength? The marble floor had become a mirror. Floor had, for millions. Naomi Carter Pierce was no longer just a billionaire CEO. She was living proof that dignity, wielded with clarity and courage, could remake the world.